Good day to you. Thank you for tuning in to Anagalactic. The man you see over here is Terrence McKenna, and the land that he is sitting on, which is sloped in this picture, is Esalen. And the direction in which the land is sloping is toward the Pacific Ocean on the Big Sur coast, which is south of Monterey and Carmel, which is at the south end of Monterey Bay. Santa Cruz is at the north horn of that very large bay, beautiful bay with an undersea canyon, studied by oceanographers and biologists for its amazing qualities. Part of a canyon system which is now buried under the sea, but it's obvious that water used to flow there. And that's why there's an undersea canyon. It's not because of ocean currents, it's because the land had been eroded by a flood of water sometime in the past, and now that part of the land surface is under the sea, but still revealing that it used to be above the surface of the sea. So it is a land that has descended under the sea in some way, either by the water level rising or the oceanic plate, the land plate floating, or the land went down. And there is some debate still occurring in geology about which of those two is the more likely explanation for the deep sea undersea canyon, the very deep canyon just south of Santa Cruz and just north of Monterey, about equidistant, one of the most amazing undersea canyons. And how did it get there? Looks like a lot of water went through there at one time. The current exit point is north, but it used to be there because there's no equivalent undersea canyon coming out through the Golden Gate, which is where the water goes out from California now. I should say from North America on the west coast, right about there, exits through the Golden Gate. It's pretty obvious. It used to exit at a much higher velocity, about 75 to 100 miles south. So south of that is the Big Sur coast, and this man is at one of the most famous places on the Big Sur coast, a wild stretch of the Pacific that was basically not really open to white explorers until a road was cut through, Highway 1, extending the entire 100-mile length of the Big Sur coast, internationally famous. If you've never heard of it, you're not alone. Geography is not Americans' strong point, and I believe that I'm an exception to that. I just love geography, and Esalen is one of the holiest places on earth to me. And today, partly because of the presence of this man at that most amazing place on earth called Esalen, which is an institute. They are famous for their massage. They're famous for their advanced massage. And I don't think I need to point out there may be a paparazzi innuendo if you know what I'm driving at. Advanced massage. What about a happy ending? They are an advanced institute who have been in touch with aliens. I mean, they know about parapsychology. Mushrooms is why McKenna is speaking there. He looks relaxed, but he's wearing a sweater. It looks sunny, but I'll tell you what, on the Big Sur coast, that sweater is going to come in handy. The temperature will change 40 degrees in as many minutes. When the sun goes down and the fog rolls in, you'll be like frying, wondering if you're getting a sunburn. And then 40 minutes later, you didn't notice this big fog bank just crashed onto you like a giant Hawaiian wave. And now it just dropped 35 degrees. And you're like shivering and wave, what the? You'd better have that sweater, Daddy-O, and then you're fine. Windbreaker is definitely in order at certain times of the year. You don't want to get drizzle on your sweater. It could soak in. You need a windbreaker and the sweater. That's my favorite combination for the high country. You want to go light. You don't want to take like a jacket. Although a lot of people do and they're glad they did. It's better be lightweight jacket. But for my money, a good sweater like Terrence McKenna's wearing there and a windbreaker, you'll fend off 98% of the inclemency that might come your way. You'll survive at the very least, okay? You may even be comfortable surviving in some inclemency where it just catches you unawares. Hypothermia is now a threat to your very life. You were sunbathing a half an hour ago. Now you're freezing to death. That's the Big Sur coast. So that, even though the sun is out, you can see it shining on the grass tilted toward the sea. And what are those things in the background? They're coastal shrubs. They just grow there. And it looks, inviting, doesn't it? Well, Esalen is nobody's idea of a bad trip. You go to Esalen, you know you've been somewhere. If you write postcards or you use texting, it's the same thing. You're going to semaphore, send photos. You're going to tell your friends. You're going to get on Facebook, whatever they call it, anything that you do. You're going to want to share. You're going to go nuts. You're going to want to come back. You're going to pay $50 just to be there. Or some inordinate amount of money is like stretching you. Like, what? I just came here to see. Well, you can drive in for $50 or whatever. And as for using the hot tubs, no. You don't live here. You're not going into our hot tubs. Well, they have to do this, but my God. It's a hot springs. You should have that open to the public. Well, I went in there. It is open to the public after 1 a.m. So you better know what you're doing because it's way out there on the Big Sur coast. It's a drive of hours from Monterey. It's a couple of hours. Well, that's hours, yes. Well, it's not in order. I mean, you can do it, but at night, at 1 a.m., on this windy coastal road that shouldn't even be there, according to Robinson Jeffers, the poet laureate of America. And so we've had our bracketing information to introduce Terrence McKenna in this second in our series on psychedelic experience, which I covered fairly thoroughly in the prior video, but I never expect anybody who hasn't seen the prior video to go back and watch, although, I mean, I recommend it, obviously, but I know you won't, I'll be pessimistic about it. That's okay, I wouldn't either. Although I have, and you might make an exception for me, I'm not counting on that, you shouldn't. So what do I want to introduce about Terrence McKenna? Well, first of all, there he is. So we're just going to scroll up. There's some more Terrence McKenna. And I think you see that is the Hallucinogens and Consciousness, Shamanism, 1982, to put a date on it. Well, what is that? 18 plus 25 is 43 years ago. 43 years ago. But it was in December, so we now know. But I don't think that's what we were looking at, so that doesn't have anything to do with what you saw before. These are more or less random from Google. So let's say you see a little more here. Scroll up. That's Esalen. That is Terrence McKenna being abducted. And I think you see some interesting looking creatures down in that obviously redwood forest. That is the southerly-most outpost of the redwoods, which were... There is Terrence. And you can see Terrence there. And then there is Terrence again, who looks like he has a mushroom umbrella. He's well known for his affiliation with mushrooms. And there's Terrence looking at some dancing elves. Somehow this rings a bell. I've gotten into studying Terrence McKenna. He's a most fascinating character. I don't know enough about him yet, although I know reputable men, who know a lot about Terrence McKenna. This guy comes on high recommendation from reputable sources, but here he's looking at 4 dancing elves. So then here's DMT. These are DMT elves. I just learned about DMT from an expert recently. I never knew anything about it until this week. Wake up from the illusion. This is Terrence McKenna, obviously making some philosophical statement according to this source. And there's Terrence and Carl Jung, and in between, some form of demonic, shamanistic bullshit. And who cares, don't look at the thing in the middle. Although it's entrancing, well, that could be the face of the devil for all you know. Carl Jung is obviously not looking. Terrence is, as usual, looking curiously. And who can say who is right? The key within, there's a lion eating the sun. Sun is dripping blood from the jaws of the lion who is chewing on the sun. So that's the key within. I do support this man, but I mean, obviously he's out there. This is obviously some podcast. There's a... We are the inheritors of 1,000,000 years of striving for the unspeakable. Well, that millions of years, I think you understand, Terrence is living in a dream world in terms of science. So there he is. It looks like he's wearing a mushroom hat and he's growing from the surface of some planet. There's obviously a galaxy looming in the distance, and there are tendrils of what's obviously the fungi gods just all around him in psychedelic splendor. Here is Terrence. You can see him in the back, and a bunch of his friends and kids. And there's Terrence in various poses. I think you're getting an idea. He's a real human being. He died of a form of brain cancer rather early, which is usually the case with cancer. And I believe that would be his wife. I'm just guessing. I don't know that much about him. And he's obviously into art. I believe that's a hookah. That is a snooker player, another snooker player. I do look at a lot of snooker. And there's a hermetic alchemist. And there's the lion chewing on the sun again. I swear I'm unfamiliar with this. I'm learning as we go. And more on Terrence McKenna, a psychedelic portrait of Terrence. And that's 2.5 hours long. There's Terrence, obviously, in a schizophrenic split. I don't know why. There's a lot going on here. The weirdest force in the universe. There's Sean Connery. I think we're done. No, there's Terrence in a distorted, distorted. And there's Terrence looking like a saint. And then the big book of generative AI, there's Terrence saying, maps of our self and our psyche. And I would say McKenna, doesn't he look Irish? I think he looks Irish. And now there's that saintly portrait, so he's revered in some way. I think I understand why. And the weekend workshop at Esalen. Okay, let's click on that, see what that says. That's 1993. That's a little later.
One of the things that's really important.
Okay, we don't want that. So I think you have an idea of Terrence McKenna there. And what I wanted to talk about was my psychedelic experience at the age of 17. So you'll have some idea from somebody who's been there. Maybe you may benefit from my experience. So my first caveat as I introduce my tale of my first and by far the best psychedelic experience, we'll get to the mushrooms, which I have taken 3 times. And the reason I emphasize the mushrooms and kind of interrupt myself here with mushrooms when I'm talking about LSD is because Terrence McKenna talks about mushrooms. And what's the difference in terms of the psychedelic experience between mushrooms and LSD? I think that's an extremely good scientific question. And so I'd just like to tell you what is my opinion on the difference between those two psychedelic experiences. Without going into chemistry or biopharmaceutical latches, nothing inside the blood-brain barrier, nothing specifically mechanistic, just a subjective evaluation. What is something that you can accept or at least consider to be tenable about what someone who might know, which would be myself in this case, what might I tell you about the difference, if you don't already know, between the psychedelic experience of the hallucinogenic mushroom variety and the synthetic material called LSD-25? Which is which, and are they the same? Are they different? Are they more the same than different? I can tell you this. It is, in my opinion, superpositional because, and that would be to extend superpositionality to a non-technical abstraction, that they're layered. So when you're looking at LSD as opposed to the typical psilocybin mushroom, which is just one example of a psychedelic fungus, they are considered to be They're not plants, and I had said that they're plants. They're not plants. Fungi are not plants. But they sure look kind of like plants. They sure don't look like animals. But they're considered to be a separate kingdom in some, which is the highest level. So there's plants, animals, and fungi. And then there's like 3 or 4, depending on the classification system of the single-celled organisms, which are quite an interesting tribe because they have a different form of semiosis. When they make more of the same, like bacteria, they simply divide, which is simple compared with how plants and animals do it, which is quite a bit more complex because it's sexual. Well, bacteria don't divide sexually, but they do divide. They divide, when they divide, they're done. There's now 2 instead of 1. You would expect that they're smaller, they know how to grow. And when they divide again, they keep getting bigger. Because they eat. They eat something. Well, bacteria have to live too. So they do get bigger. And then if they get big enough, they split and now you have 2 instead of 1. Well, that's not how plants and animals do it at all. You need a male and a female. That's quite an innovation. A male and a female gamete. Well, that's also true of humans. So when we're talking about the psychedelic experience, we're talking about something that humans all over the world know about. There are psychedelic experiences recorded pretty much everywhere you look, which is a remarkable statement because it requires the cooperation of the fungus kingdom. That they know ahead of time, or the designers, which is how I would put it, well, they're there. They're definitely there. Well, that's part of some plan. You can't really deny, they're there, so they're not there, so they're definitely there. Well, what are they? They're these mushrooms that people all over the world discover and learn how to use. Well, you know what the people who do that say about that? How did you know these mushrooms won't just kill you? They say, and this is on the South American side, the plants taught us. Which gets to the old Don Juan separate reality Carlos Castaneda shamanistic experience. And you heard, or you saw the word shaman associated with McKenna. Well, for the reason that he deals with hallucinogenic, organic. I don't think he even talks about LSD, but he might, and I would expect that he does somewhere. But the way I know him is from that weekend workshop at Esalen, which I attempted to locate to play you some of it, and I am going to attempt to do that shortly, so that you'll get to see him talk. Which for me, I only found out about this man to the point that I watched him at Esalen lecture on hallucinogenic drugs. Hallucinogenic fungi he's an expert on mushrooms, but that's really just the tip of a whole world on which I'm not sure, although I would expect he probably knows a whale of a lot about LSD too. And it's not just LSD or mushrooms. You may be aware there's peyote, which is a cactus, and there are ways of combining plants, which will produce a psychedelic experience. But by far the most famous one, besides LSD, which is synthetic, it does not occur naturally in nature, but it certainly has a psychedelic effect. You might say it's the ultimate, but that's not fair. It's actually a bit different. And mushrooms, I believe, from personal experience with both mushrooms and LSD, one time each, that mattered. There were a couple of other attempts with both LSD and mushrooms, but the LSD was progressively becoming not as intense, so I desisted after, I just say 3. But in the case of the mushrooms, I took it 3 times, and it was getting better. And I stopped essentially for the same reason, but it's really in 2 opposite scenarios. Why did you stop if it was declining? Well, I think any investor knows that because it's a losing proposition, it's probably going to keep declining. But if it's going up, you would normally invest, like, let's do it some more. And I stopped really, I say in my own mind for the same reason, it's because it didn't match the original experience, which was sufficient, which is saying something, and I could be mistaken, that there is a strong subjective aspect on that. You could say I may not be admitting some fear, or I may not be coping with some interfering emotion, that perhaps I haven't looked at it completely rationally. Well, the mushrooms were just getting better and better. Wouldn't you want to take the mushrooms a fourth and perhaps a fifth time? Just an open-ended schedule because it's getting better. I might. I now have that capability to ingest some hallucinogenic mushrooms in any amount from 1 to 4 doses. And it could be a little more. It's like estimating a thermonuclear explosion. You may not be exactly right because you're not sure what you're doing. Well, it's the same with psychedelics. You don't know how that explosion is going to go every single time. There's too much random, well, from our perspective, random. It's just the natural influence of your environment on any particular situation. You can't possibly know all the parameters. That's well known. That's all relativity, by the way, in one aspect. Well, what I've been saying is, for your benefit, assuming you just want to know some definition, some handle on what is the psychedelic experience in any category, and there are several categories of psychedelic experience, I distinguish strongly between LSD and everything else. LSD is separate. And the reason I say that is just because of my own experience. But it's not just because of my own experience, but I found my opinion, and it is an opinion, that LSD is something quite special. Which is saying something because, according to my way of looking at things, if you're talking about either organic, that it grows in the earth, or synthetic, it comes from a laboratory, which LSD-25 definitely does. You have to actually manufacture it. So there is a certain philosophic and perhaps even more intensive biologic or physiologic issue. Should you be ingesting a synthetic drug? Well, we ingest into our bodies penicillin, and it does wonders against disease. I would classify it that way loosely. There's nothing adverse about it. That was at one time rather hotly debated, but as part of a sociological adjustment process to a phenomenon which was really under attack. Anything that benefits the masses, anything that benefits humanity, in other words, does not directly benefit the government, is a very likely source of money. And all kinds of forces go to work to capitalize on that possible money pipeline to get control of whatever it is the mob, the population of the country, likes. That day or that decade, or in this case LSD, they're into psychedelics. Well, first of all, make sure you illegalize it so you can control it. That's the first step. That was done with marijuana. There was even a psychotic effort to shut down the wine industry, really the alcohol industry, with an amendment to the Constitution, which was repealed, I think, 2 years later. But the United States is hideously notorious for its ridiculous decisions about drugs. Because it's worth so much money to certain controlling group minds of men, who once you're addicted to money, you'll do anything to keep that money pipeline open. Well, hallucinogenics was instantly recognized as a new way to at least react to the public, because that's what the government does, is how can we get more money out of those serfs, those slaves? How can we get more money out of them? Well, if it's alcohol, we'll just declare prohibition. If it's marijuana, we'll send you to prison for possession. If it's hallucinogenics, you'll go to prison for corrupting the youth or whatever. They tried to accuse the pioneers such as Leary, who defended the whole movement. And Leary, I believe, is a hero for that. He certainly was on high ground, and so is McKenna. McKenna is a different kind of scientist. He's a field biologist. He actually goes to visit the tribes, and he learns from them what they know. Well, I call that, sir, a scientist. Sir or ma'am, Terrence McKenna is my kind of scientist. If he has the right stuff, which you'd better have, otherwise it just sounds like another paper. Oh, I went to visit the tribes. Well, I'll tell you what. I don't think you can really go too far wrong from finding out what a man like McKenna. You see, you have to know your source. Is McKenna trustworthy? I would say we need to listen to him so you'll be able to decide yourself. But you can also do this on your own. The weekend workshop at Esalen with McKenna, the one that I wanted to show you, and I'm going to delay that for now, is McKenna speaking at Esalen. It's over an hour, so we would have to be selective. I would have to put it from my point of view. But it's definitely worth seeing, just so you know what he looks like, what he sounds like, what he's saying. You'll get to see the people who are attending to his voice, who I don't know if they're paying to hear him, but it wouldn't surprise me. But I don't think it would matter to them if they paid. They think he's worth paying money to hear. But I actually don't know the details. But there are a lot of people sitting out on the open meadow right above the Pacific surf. At quite a height on the precipitous Big Sur coast, this place is a paradise. It's a small Shangri-La. And I've been there. I went into their hot tubs. The same ones that Henry Miller visited, and many famous people have been to the Big Sur hot tubs, I'm kind of a collector of hot tubs, or hot springs. I try to visit them all. That's one of my goals, is to visit all the hot springs on the West Coast. Well, I'm going to have to hurry up because there's a lot of those that I haven't visited. And eventually expand that, assuming some time and because nothing good is ever lost. I know those hot springs are there forever. It doesn't matter what happens to the geology, geography, the fate of the earth, the fate of mankind. I saw those hot springs. They're real, and therefore they are eternal. There may be better hot springs yet. I would bet on that. And I would be, as of now, looking forward to seeing those as well, assuming I can go on to the next level, which I believe is the solution to the game. Any age can appreciate that. Are you enjoying life? Would you like to go on to the next level? Well, the universe loves you. The universe wants you to go on to the next level, and now you're on your way. And you'll learn more as you grow, but now you're on your way because you made that decision. And encourage the youth. Are you enjoying life? Good. Because that's exactly what the universe would like you to think. The universe loves you. And you have a consciousness. Well, you might wonder, perhaps there's a consciousness that loves you back. Of course there is, my child. Of course there is, my son. Of course there is, my devoted student on YouTube. Of course, you could say the universe. For now, you're young. It is the universe. But the universe belongs in a higher space, doesn't it? Yes, because so do you. That's what you're asking about. You're having fun? Would you like to have more fun? Well, when you get to be 15 or 16, we're going to give you some acid. Or we're going to give you some peyote, or some mushrooms, or the witch doctors of our tribe are going to treat you to some goody, hallucinogenic psychedelic, and they'll be right there to help you with your journey. You're a little young now. Have some coffee, have some tobacco. You're of age. Have some alcohol. You're 10. You can have some alcohol with your grandfather watching over you as he gets soused right in front of your very eyes. And you're wondering, yes, you'll be able to get soused as Grandpa. We don't mind you watching him. You may not want to go the way Grandpa did and get soused that way. Well, you're young and you'll learn. But eventually you're going to have drugs galore. There's DMT. You'll be going to Papua New Guinea, and hiking into their cone where there's a strange tribe. They just has this powder. And you're going to be able to be one of the first white men to ever ingest this super deluxe hallucinogen. And you're going to travel to the stars, and you're going to come back and tell us all, and we're going to welcome you home. Wouldn't that be a nice world where we all were sky pilots, just dropping drugs and just tripping, and then we get back together? Well, who's minding the barn? Who's taking care of the rent? There's all kinds of things in a co-op. But I'll tell you what, the universe is huge. And if you wish upon a star, it makes no difference where you are or who you are, or even when you are. For when you wish upon a star, you're probably an idolater, and you need to grow up a little. No, we don't worship the creation, although it's an easy identity to make. It sure looks like the universe loves you. Doesn't it keep you warm? It brought you here for the universe to see. Now you're here. Are you happy? Well, you're not happy enough. You need to be permanently happy. That's what the universe wants, so that you're not afraid. So that you're happy and you know you're safe. You know that the universe brought you into existence for a reason. Here's the reason. Have all the fun that the universe wants you to have. That's what the universe wants you to have. You know why? Because the consciousness behind the universe is the consciousness behind yours. Your consciousness is a product of that consciousness. If that consciousness loves you, as now you know it does, isn't it very much like you? It already knows you. So it's a person. It's got to be a person. Do you know the name of that person? There is a proverb in the Israeli transmission of the Psalms, near the end of the Psalms, of which there are over 100, and this is toward the end, and it's not a psalm of David. It's the psalm of a prophet. And so this is in the collection of the Psalms, most of which are attributed to David, and there's no reason to doubt that. But some of them, quite a few, one of them is attributed to Moshe. But there's one that's attributed to another man that's near the end who asked this question. He asked a question about the creation, which is what we're always doing here. In this case, does it love me? And the answer is yes, of course. And now the next question is, well, is there a consciousness behind the love that the universe shows me? And I think you know the answer. Because the universe, by definition, can't love you. But a consciousness can love you. Does it? The universe tells you that that consciousness does love you. So what is your responsibility, if any? Exactly what you're discovering. Love would just love you to respond. That's what love wants. Someone, some entity that loves you, really the best thing you can do in response is to love that entity right back. And don't hide it. And whether you believe in that entity or not, I think you're just kidding yourself if you're questioning the existence of that entity. You would have no idea what love is in any way if it didn't exist before you were born. So that love is before you. You know what that means? According to strict logic that I pursue as a scientist, it means it's above you. And that's literally true. That's the kingdom of God. Is the kingdom of God within? I have proved that it is. And you can't have a kingdom of God going out forever that consists of galaxies and larger structures forever out, bigger and bigger. You will have an inner temporal conjugate. And that is called now. And that's why you can't pinpoint it. It's because it's moving faster than you can think. It's moving faster than you can think. Does that sound like it could be describing a force? You can only see that force in hyperspheric construction. And that will be in our next video, as I have been promising for 2 years. Hyperspheric geometry, just as your introduction to that. It's the enclosing space of spherical space. The analogy is in the linear construction, which I've been through dozens of times in my prior 1,200 videos. But now there are 375 public videos, and I maintain a few of those old videos that describe to you the spheric system. This is the embedding space of the spheric system. I discovered it, and it is by far my greatest discovery in a list of dozens of greatest discoveries of all time. So I am now claiming to be a real scientist of the highest order. I am getting all the solutions to every question that matters, and then some. So hypersphericity is the geometric space that's one dimension in spheric space higher than spheric space. And that is called hyperspheric. It is a 4-component number that's dualized into a 2-component, 2-componency number. And that is such an improvement on Einstein's skewed 3-1 split on 3D space, 1D time, 3D space, 1D time. This is 2D, 2D, but it's not linear. It's 2P, 2P. It's 2 proportion, 2 proportion. It's the relationship of 2 fractions. And that defines both light speed, and you would have to also say it's reciprocal. There is a reciprocal to light speed, because light speed is a fraction, it's distance over time, so it's linear. But that in itself is a 2-component number that needs to be rationalized into space energy formulation that I discovered. And this solves all of the unification problems, including the grand unification theory and the unified field solution, which I discovered, the quantum of gravity, and the correct description of quantum gravity, which is a concept rather than an object. The quantum of gravity is an object. I discovered that. That takes care of quite a bit of flotsam and jetsam and overhead that poor science has accumulated because of the nasty bad turn we took upon Newton's invention of the calculus. It has been abused, and now the calculus is no longer an assist to science. It is a curse. I solved that and turned it into a blessing. The way to see spheric space, I have explained. The way to see hyperspheric space requires the most you're ever going to expend of your brain power to actually invoke your own supervision, and you will see better than you've ever seen in your whole life. This will transcend the psychedelic experience itself, because then you'll be able to see the universe the way it actually is. Stay tuned for that. It's our introduction to hypersphericity, which gives us the center of the universe, the edge of the universe, and the angular momentum rotational component of the entire unified universe. In 4-component space, in proportional space, purely rational, with an infinity that is defined for the first time conjugally, and a number system that is the binary conjugal number system itself, which powers our computers and has a binary number system representation. I discovered the origin of the binary number system in order to explain superposition and to explain the jump from polarity, which is 180 degrees, to conjugality, which is 90 degrees, and that we have some sirens. I'll be right back with a promised conclusion and the description of my experience on LSD at the age of 17 at San Gregorio Beach in 1971, when I was 17 years old and stayed up all night barefoot at the beach alone. And it changed my life to this day, much to the positive. Stay tuned, keep looking up. We have a waning full moon, and we'll be back quickly. Thank you so much for tuning in.